Imagine that we are stepping into a time machine to visit ancient Sparta, one of the most famous city-states of ancient Greece, known for its militaristic focus and rigorously disciplined society. Located in the Peloponnese region, it stood out for its unique social system and military prowess, which were at the heart of its culture and politics. The Spartans lived in a way that prioritized strength and military efficiency from a young age. Children were trained in a program known as the agoge, which prepared them not only physically, but also mentally to be relentless warriors. This preparation placed Sparta in a position of great power within Greece, allowing them to exert influence and control over their neighbors and, in many cases, their allies. The social and political structure was also unique in its emphasis on equality among its citizens, at least in theory, which set Sparta apart from other Greek polis, where disparities between social classes were more pronounced. Land was divided equitably, and luxury was despised. Everyone was expected to live austere lives to avoid distractions from their main goal, being effective in war. This context of strict discipline and dedication to the art of war made Sparta a feared and respected power in ancient Greece. But how could such a heavily armed and disciplined society disintegrate? That's something we will explore later. For now, remember that this military and social base was crucial for understanding Sparta's dominant position during its peak. Now that we have a clear vision of Sparta's historical context, let's delve a little deeper into one of its most emblematic aspects, the agoge system. The agoge was not just a military training program, but a comprehensive educational scheme that began at the age of 7 and extended until the age of 20. This method was mandatory for all male Spartan citizens and aimed to shape not only soldiers, but also citizens who embodied Spartan ideals of discipline, obedience, and endurance. The young were separated from their families and lived in barracks, where they were taught to fight, hunt, and survive with the bare minimum. The education was not only physical, it also included teachings on music, dance, and warfare, but always with a focus on discipline and the ability to endure pain and adversity. This rigidity sought to eliminate any weakness, preparing individuals to be parts of a well-oiled military machine. The impact of the agoge on Spartan society was profound. It created an extremely cohesive and uniform community where individualism was discouraged. All Spartans were expected to put the needs of the city-state above their own. This sense of unity and sacrifice was what allowed them to dominate on the battlefield, but it also restricted the development of creativity and innovation. Additionally, this system had an impact on family structure, as family ties were subordinated to the state. Children were considered as future defenders of the polis rather than members of a family. Women, although they enjoyed a relatively high status and were educated to be strong to produce healthy children, were also subject to this system that primarily valued their ability to contribute to Sparta's military machine. This unique social and military model in Sparta was one of its greatest strengths, but it also laid the groundwork for some of the vulnerabilities that would eventually lead to its fall. The rigidity and resistance to change prevented Sparta from effectively adapting to new contexts and challenges, a topic we will address later. For now, it is crucial to understand how this rigorous system formed the base of Spartan society and how it permeated every aspect of their lives. When addressing the external political relations of Sparta, it is impossible not to highlight its role in the Peloponnesian Wars, a conflict that deeply marked the course of ancient Greek history. This confrontation, which lasted from 431 to 404 BC, was essentially a struggle for supremacy between Athens and Sparta, and their respective alliances, the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League. Sparta, leading the Peloponnesian League, was seen as the bastion of oligarchy and military tradition, in opposition to the democracy and naval power of Athens. The Spartan strategy during these wars reflected its militaristic and conservative approach, favoring land warfare and sieges, while Athens relied on its naval superiority. Sparta's ability to form and maintain alliances was crucial. Through its leadership in the Peloponnesian League, Sparta managed to unify various Greek states under its command, not only to face Athens, but to preserve the oligarchic order against Athenian democratic tendencies. Spartan influence in these states was often exercised through the installation of military garrisons and governments aligned with its interests, ensuring their loyalty and cooperation. Sparta's final triumph in the Peloponnesian Wars, especially after the capture of Athens, seemed to confirm its dominance. However, this success brought unexpected challenges. Sparta found itself in a leadership position over all of Greece, a task for which it was neither culturally nor politically prepared, given its inward and militaristic focus. The aftermath of these wars and the extension of Spartan power brought complications. Sparta had to deal with new administrative responsibilities and face states that, although formally allies, often resented its heavy and sometimes tyrannical authority. Moreover, the constant need to maintain its influence and control over other Greek states drained its resources and exposed its limitations in terms of long-term leadership and governance. This period also illustrates how alliances and wars shaped not only Sparta's external politics, but also its internal structure and eventual decline. The reliance on military strength and the lack of flexibility in political administration eventually limited Sparta's ability to adapt to changes in the Greek geopolitical landscape. This will be a point we continue to explore, as these external dynamics played a crucial role in the disintegration of the once powerful Sparta. Despite its image as a homogeneous and disciplined society, Sparta was not exempt from internal conflicts and social and political tensions. These internal challenges played a crucial role in its eventual disintegration and provide valuable insight into the limitations of its rigid social and political system. One of the main internal problems was the increasing economic inequality, exacerbated by its rigid social structure. Although the Spartans were known for their austere lifestyle, the reality was that wealth and land were increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few. This was partly due to the inheritance system, which did not distribute land equitably, but allowed it to accumulate within specific families. This phenomenon eroded the ideal of equality, isosomia, that all Spartans supposedly shared. Additionally, the number of Spartan citizens was in decline due to the demanding requirements of the agoge, constant wars, and strict standards for obtaining and maintaining citizenship. This decline not only reduced the pool of available soldiers, but also led to an increase in the number of Pyrioiesi, free non-citizen residents, and helots, essentially enslaved serfs who worked the Spartan lands. This decrease in the number of full Spartiates exacerbated class tensions and created an atmosphere of discontent and potential rebellion. The serfs, in particular, were a constant source of fear for the Spartans, as they outnumbered the citizens and were treated with extreme harshness. Revolts by the helots, such as the significant rebellion following the earthquake in 464 BC, demonstrated Sparta's vulnerability to internal conflicts, especially given its dependence on the helots for agriculture and the economy. Politically, although Sparta had a structure that included 2 kings and several institutions, such as the Gerousia, Council of Elders, and the Apella, Assembly of Citizens, power was not always balanced, and internal struggles for control among the aristocratic families could be intense. These struggles often paralyzed decision-making or skewed policies in ways that favored particular interests over the common good. Finally, Sparta's resistance to change and innovation was also reflected in its internal conflicts. The lack of adaptability in its institutions and cultural practices, along with a growing inability to respond to economic and social changes, left Sparta poorly equipped to handle the internal and external pressures of a constantly changing world. These tensions and internal conflicts reveal a complexity in Spartan society that is often overshadowed by its military reputation. As we move forward, we will see how these internal fractures not only weakened Sparta from within, but also affected its ability to face external challenges. Sparta's economy was uniquely different from that of other Greek city-states, largely due to its focus on militarization and austere simplicity. However, this same focus brought with it a series of limitations and challenges that eventually contributed to Sparta's decline. One of the most distinctive aspects of the economy was its rejection of trade and the common currency that prevailed in other parts of Greece. The Spartans used iron bars as currency, a method that discouraged the accumulation of wealth and foreign trade. This system aimed to maintain equality and avoid corruption and luxury, but it also economically isolated Sparta and limited its ability to interact in an increasingly interconnected world. Moreover, the economy heavily depended on the helots, who cultivated the lands and performed all agricultural tasks, allowing Spartan citizens to dedicate themselves exclusively to military training. While this system provided the necessary food base, it also created a dangerous dependence on a subjugated and often hostile population. The economic structure also suffered due to the rigidity of its land distribution. Land was distributed among citizens to ensure their equality, but over time, due to demographic decline and inheritance laws that favored a few families, the land began to concentrate in the hands of a few. This not only eroded the principle of Spartan equality, but also limited the economy's ability to adapt to new circumstances, such as the needs of a changing population or the pressures of external conflicts. The lack of innovation was another major challenge. While other Greek polis, like Athens, benefited from advances in technology and trade, Sparta maintained a conservative and traditionalist approach that discouraged any form of economic or technological innovation. This resistance to change meant that Sparta was often ill-equipped to handle economic crises or take advantage of new commercial and technological opportunities. Finally, the Spartan economy faced the challenge of maintaining a large and powerful army without the economic resources that would normally sustain such an endeavor. Austerity and self-sufficiency were virtues in Sparta, but they also limited its ability to finance prolonged wars or respond to economic emergencies. These limitations and challenges highlight how Sparta's economic model, although effective in sustaining its military focus and egalitarian ideals in the short term, contributed to its vulnerability and decline in the long term, especially when faced with challenges that required economic adaptability and flexibility. Spartan culture was eminently conservative, valuing tradition and continuity over innovation and change. This cultural rigidity had its roots in the agoge system and the Spartan social and political structure, which prioritized discipline, conformity, and resistance to change. While these characteristics strengthened Sparta militarily and gave it a distinctive cultural identity, they also significantly limited its ability to adapt to external changes and evolve alongside the rest of the Greek world. Sparta's aversion to change manifested in various aspects of its society. For example, in terms of technology and art, Sparta was notably behind compared to other Greek city-states. While places like Athens and Corinth were advancing in arts and sciences, introducing innovations in architecture, theater, philosophy, and technology, Sparta maintained a minimalist and functional approach that rejected such advances as frivolous or potentially corrupting. This resistance to change also affected the way Sparta managed its foreign policies. In a world where political alliances, economic strategies, and military tactics were constantly evolving, Spartan inflexibility became a disadvantage. Its ability to respond to new military tactics or adapt to changing economic realities was limited, often leaving them in a reactive rather than proactive position. Moreover, the educational system, although effective in producing disciplined soldiers, did not foster critical thinking or creativity, skills that are essential in leaders capable of navigating times of change and crisis. Spartan education discouraged intellectual exploration and curiosity, focusing almost exclusively on physical strength and obedience. This lack of cultural and educational adaptability became particularly evident after the Peloponnesian Wars, when Sparta attempted to assume a broader leadership role in Greece. Without the political or economic flexibility to manage a larger empire or integrate new ideas and technologies, Sparta struggled to maintain its dominance. Its enemies, who were often more adaptable and open to new ways of doing things, found ways to counter Spartan tactics, both on the battlefield and in the political arena. Sparta's position as one of the leading military powers in ancient Greece inevitably put it in conflict with various Greek states and foreign entities throughout its history. These external pressures, both military and political, played a crucial role in the power dynamics of the region, and eventually in the decline of the city-state. After its victory in the Peloponnesian Wars, Sparta found itself in an undisputed leadership position among the Greek city-states. However, this dominance was not well received by all, and its authority was constantly challenged by other states, notably Thebes and Athens. Thebes, in particular, emerged as a formidable rival after it reformed its army and increased its political power. The Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, where the Thebans, led by Epaminondas, decisively defeated the Spartans, marked a turning point, demonstrating that Sparta was no longer invincible and significantly altering the balance of power in Greece. In addition to conflicts with other Greek city-states, Sparta also faced pressures from larger entities such as the Persian Empire. The Persians, interested in weakening Greek power to prevent future rebellions and secure their dominance in the region, frequently engaged in Greek politics, supporting one state or another in internal conflicts as it suited their interests. Their financial and military support for Sparta's rivals was an important factor that contributed to the erosion of Spartan power. The pressure from these external enemies forced Sparta to maintain a level of militarization and constant vigilance, which proved to be a great drain on its resources and population. The need to defend its territories and maintain its authority involved a sustained effort that progressively weakened its internal structure, already strained by economic and social problems. This constant external pressure also revealed and exacerbated internal weaknesses. The rigidity of its social and political system, its resistance to change, and its reliance on a limited agrarian economy became liabilities in an environment where adaptability and the ability to form dynamic alliances were crucial for survival. As its enemies adapted and reformed, Sparta struggled to maintain its traditional model, which ultimately contributed to its inability to sustain its position as a dominant power. The demographic decline of Sparta was one of the most critical factors that contributed to its eventual weakening and collapse. This phenomenon profoundly affected the military structure of the city-state, which was the pillar of its power and stability. During its peak, the Spartan military system depended on a constant body of trained and combat-ready citizens. However, over time, the number of pure Spartiates began to decrease for various reasons. One of the most significant was the rigidity of its own citizenship laws. Being considered a full citizen with the right to participate in the agoge and in military and political life required meeting strict criteria that, combined with high combat mortality rates and eugenic practices, limited the number of eligible men. Additionally, hereditary practices and social norms that favored certain families meant that many properties and political rights were concentrated in a few hands, which discouraged the inclusion of new members into the ranks of citizens and led to many Spartans being relegated to lower social classes or even losing their status for failing to meet economic and military duties. This decline in the number of citizens was accompanied by an increase in the number of perioeci and, more critically, helots. The perioeci, though free, had no political rights and were primarily engaged in crafts and trade, while the helots, who were essentially serfs, worked the lands and were constantly monitored due to their potential for rebellion. The reliance on a servile population to maintain the agrarian economy and free Spartans for military training became increasingly risky as the proportion of serfs to citizens grew. This changing demography weakened the cohesion and effectiveness of the Spartan military structure. With fewer citizens available for military service, Sparta's ability to project its power and defend its interests diminished. Moreover, the need to control a large and potentially hostile helot population consumed resources and diverted attention from external threats. Finally, Sparta's lack of adaptability in its demographic and social policy, combined with its reluctance to reform its structures to include more members in its civic body, exacerbated this demographic problem. While other Greek polis adapted and grew by incorporating new citizens and reforming their social and military practices, Sparta clung to an idealized past that was no longer viable in a changing reality. In summary, the demographic decline not only reduced the number of Spartans capable of bearing arms and defending the polis, but also highlighted the structural flaws of a society that could not adapt to new challenges, thus contributing to its gradual but inevitable decline. Sparta's legacy in global history and culture is both fascinating and complex. The city-state is not only remembered for its formidable military capacity, but also for its unique social system and influence on concepts of governance and discipline. However, its failures have also influenced how it is historically perceived, providing a more nuanced image of this ancient power. From a positive perspective, Sparta is often idealized for its exceptional dedication to discipline and military efficiency. Its educational system, the agoge, is admired for its ability to create elite soldiers, and its society is seen as an example of order and stability. In times of uncertainty or conflict, the Spartan vision of a rigorously organized community focused on common defense is often elevated as an ideal to follow. Additionally, the political structure of Sparta, with its two kings and systems of checks and balances between the Gerousia, the Apella, and the Ephors, has been studied as an interesting precursor to modern concepts of divided government and balance of powers. Sparta's influence on political and military thought extends through the centuries, inspiring theorists and leaders in various eras. However, Sparta's flaws are also significant and contribute to a more critical perception of its legacy. The rigidity of its system, although providing stability, also impeded adaptability and innovation. The excessive dependence on conformity and uniformity limited the intellectual and cultural development of Sparta, leaving it at a comparative disadvantage to cities like Athens, which flourished in arts and sciences. The way Sparta treated its enslaved serfs and its brutal system of control also tarnishes its legacy. The oppression and exploitation of this servile class, essential to the Spartan economy, raise serious ethical and moral questions about the human costs of its stability and military success. These practices have led many historians and philosophers to question the viability and fairness of the Spartan model. Finally, the decline of Sparta offers valuable lessons about the dangers of resistance to change and the importance of adaptability in politics and society. Sparta's failure to adjust to new political and demographic realities highlights the need to balance tradition with innovation, a lesson applicable in multiple historical and contemporary contexts. Sparta's legacy is dual. It is admired for its strength and order, but also seen as an example of the limitations and failures of an overly rigid and isolated system. In contemplating the rise and fall of Sparta, it is essential to recognize the multiple causes that contributed to its disintegration, and to draw valuable lessons for contemporary history. Sparta not only teaches us about power and discipline, but also about the limitations of a closed system and the importance of adaptability and flexibility. In a globalized and constantly changing world, the ability to adjust social, economic, and political structures is crucial for survival and success. While tradition can provide a sense of identity and stability, innovation is essential for progress and competitiveness. Finding a proper balance between these two aspects can help societies thrive without losing their essence. Sparta's reliance on an oppressed class and the concentration of power and resources in a limited elite created imbalances that eventually contributed to its downfall. Promoting a more equitable distribution of resources and opportunities can ensure a more stable and just society. Sparta teaches us that rigid leadership and inflexible governance can be counterproductive. The ability to lead through consensus and inclusion and to adapt governance policies to new realities is vital for any society or institution. Recognizing and learning from these lessons can provide valuable insights for addressing contemporary challenges in an increasingly complex and dynamic world. Thank you for watching the video.